All right, welcome to the June 13th, episode 2 of Cross Format Fandom. Greetings, Exalted Ones. I'm your host, JL. With me always is T. Morrow.
Good day.
Actually, I don't know if that's entirely correct. You're not with me all the time. That would make for some awkward moments at home.
A little bit.
Well, I don't know, maybe exciting. I don't know. We'll see. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about in a couple minutes in terms of what our main overall topic is. You have to excuse me, I'm still putting my words together. I just woke up because, as mentioned last episode, Troy and I work evenings, so this is like our 5 a.m., 7 a.m. right now. We would just like to thank everyone who listened to our first episode and followed, listened, engaged, or whatever, however it phrases the level of measurement on our various social medias. And thank you, Team Morrow, for putting that podcast up.
Oh, no problem. It took a little bit, but I got there.
That's right. We're responsible for millions of dollars at a different company, but trying to figure out how to upload a podcast. How do we do this?
Oh, God.
Insert tab A into slot B. The guys from IKEA made this, didn't they? They made it. So a fun little bit of entertainment news is Troy and I had also debated when we heard this next little bit of information I'm talking about. We had booked the Fortress of Solitude to record this show, and then we got a little bit of insider information that a particular project was doing some background casting just outside Calgary today. And I'm not going to say what that project is because part of working in productions is trying to keep things as down low as you can. That's why they film under different names a lot of the time, such as Star Wars, Return of the Jedi had Blue Harvest, sort of keep fandom down. So I'll come back to the topic of what that film may be at a later time. However, it was a very tempting...
Yes. Oh, man. Yes.
But having come off a 10-hour night shift and then having to drive another 4 hours and then wait anywhere up to 5 to 8 hours to potentially get some background extra work, as awesome as it is being on a set, might be something we had decided that was maybe better for another time, or maybe something a little bit more pronounced. But that particular project, and again, I don't want to say the name of it right now. For those of you who know, you know, and that's great. For those of you who don't, we'll reveal it later, but it does tie into our main topic.
Yes, it does.
Of today, which is reboots, remakes, retools. Reboot. We don't have sound effects. We should put Bob from Reboot here in that. Reboot, click, or whatever it was. Yeah, that's another fun little moment too. I saw on the TV channels I have, because I still have cable.
What?
That some of the kids channels on it. There's a show like Reboot something Guardians.
Oh, it's horrible. We'll stop talking about it.
Really?
It's not cool.
Are we in toxic fandom already about this?
Well, not toxic. It's
not aimed for us, is what you're saying.
Well, it doesn't bring any kind of nostalgia to it. It's like live action plus animation, and it's like you see like the live actors put on like VR helmet kind of things, and then you can see the reactions through like the reflection of their VR helmets while they're
like an Iron Man sort of setup.
In the sense, but not like, you can kind of like, it's almost like a shadow of their face. You can see them reacting to things in what they're doing. So basically it's like, instead of Bob and Enzo and them going into a game to save the place, it's the gamers that go in, and now they're like the guardians.
So there's no like
of the internet
gamers, and there's no users and guardians, or just the users are the guardians.
Yeah, which just flips it upside down, but
it is a little weird. I mean, it's a fresh take.
It is. And like I said, if some people enjoy it, and that's great. But I'm not a fan of that particular reboot.
Okay, well, that works, and we'll get to a little bit later on in the show just some reboots and remakes that we thought were done pretty well, and ones that maybe we didn't necessarily enjoy all that much. We'll get to that, as well as a newer remake, little film called Godzilla King of the Monsters. I'm a huge Godzilla fan, have been since I was a kid, and my childhood friend Echo, that's his real name. He introduced me to the whole world of Godzilla and kaiju, and whether you're watching the original film or the various series and franchises that are involved in it, because there's a lot. There's different timelines. There's a whole bunch, not to mention American versions. But we'll come into that a little later as well. The first bit of information I think would be interesting to talk about is what's the difference between a reboot, a remake, and a retooling? What are your thoughts? What's a reboot, a remake, or a retool to you? Just simplified.
Simplified, well, obviously a remake, you're remaking something original and then you're making something new. I believe like a reboot is you're trying to reboot a series or show from its original. And retooling is you take what the existing universe and you tool it up a little bit to whatever you're making for that.
So do you think it'd be fair to say that a remake would be Godzilla, or is Godzilla a reboot?
Well, I think it would be more of a reboot from
Matthew Broderick version.
Well, let's say yeah, okay. From Matthew Broderick version, from that one to 2014, really rebooted it.
Okay.
Right to this part because it's now the same Godzilla from the 2014 to 2019 one.
Yes.
Right.
He's a little bigger and his spines are bigger.
Well, because it's different, a little bit longer period of time between the two, right?
Yes.
So
radiation plays here, folks.
Right. So it's the same one. So I would say that they rebooted an American version. Now, if you go to like the Japanese versions,
the Toho,
those are straight like right through. Those aren't really reboots. Those are they're making movies that connect sometimes, most of the time.
So
some timeline difference, but
how I view it is I would consider a remake of Godzilla, the one we have now. I would consider it a remake, certainly from the Matthew Broderick version, but in general from that version of the film, as well as the Toho version. The Toho version has a sort of different universe, although a lot of the characters and themes are here. I would consider Star Trek Discovery a retool because they're not really, I mean, they might be, again, folks, I don't watch it, so there might be a lot of plot points I'm missing at this juncture, but from what I understand, it's a retooling, even though the ship and the uniforms all look different. The producers want you to just imagine or pretend that the original series looked like this, I guess, is kind of the impression that the producers have given.
Or this ship and this crew had these uniforms, and then it moved to those uniforms later.
Yeah.
I don't know how, like I said, I haven't watched a single episode of Discovery, so I can't really talk much about that part of it. I know what the original. Now this takes place before, right?
Yeah, so it's like Enterprise too. Enterprise didn't last more than I think 3 seasons because a lot of fans were like, "Why does the past look more advanced than the future?" And looks like they've gone this route with Star Trek Discovery as well, which takes place in the Prime timeline. So it's not an alternate timeline like the Paramount Kelvin, which I would consider a reboot.
I would say.
It could almost be considered a sequel because Leonard Nimoy's character does leave the Prime timeline and enter this timeline and events happen. So you could consider it a sequel or a reboot. That's a reboot to me because it's not remaking everything. It's just rebooting where everything starts from.
Yeah.
So you've got a retool like Star Trek Discovery. You've got a remake like Godzilla. And you've got a reboot like Star Trek 2009 all the way into beyond. And that's probably as far as we're going to get with those particular films. For those who don't know, Paramount owns the movie rights and CBS owns the television rights. So despite the fact that Star Trek is one franchise, it's owned in partial by 2 different production companies, which is kind of weird in a sense, and has caused some problems with making some of its projects before. As I mentioned last episode, some of the fan films and CBS getting a little bit of venom from fans over the fact that they were trying to sue a fan film that was being made because a lot of fans thought this particular fan film looked better than what Discovery was pulling out. And while I am a very big supporter of not messing with the Prime timeline, it's done. You don't need to do anything after, Enterprise and before Kirk. I like that they're doing a Picard series. I'm curious about this one because I'm more curious about after. We don't need to keep introducing, I'll just get this off my chest now. You don't try and introduce legendary captains before James T. Kirk, okay? And I say that as a man who stood behind the Shatner, put my hand on his shoulder and shook his hand and said, thank you. There is a juncture at which you go, you're not going to do this better, so don't. Superman, tie in real quick, his suit is consistently changing. and the various media, whether it be video games or comics or films or television. Some suits I really like, some suits I don't. Just so everyone is aware, you are not going to make it look cooler than it did when it was first premiered. To a lot of people, Chris Reeves' outfit looks a little bit too comic book. That's how it looked at the time. Henry Cavill's, to some, in my opinion, I like his Man of Steel suit. His Justice League suit looks a little too plasticky for me, but some people like it. You're never going to make it look better than it looked when it was in its prime. Like, you can take the cape away, you can take the S away, you can change it. Every actor wears that suit differently and has a different suit. But at the end of the day, as long as the main themes are there, you've got the staple of it.
I can see where you're coming from with that.
Yeah.
But the original, the Superman, he can run fast in a train. He can only leap single bound. That was Superman. When we got later was Superman, and a cool Superman because it changed through the comics and then into the movie. So really, the Shield S looked like a shield, and the actual original looked like a shield with just a little S on it.
Yeah.
Before it became what it is now.
Yeah, and that's another little note is he was only given the ability to fly once the cartoons had to actually come in place. Yes. It was just done to make it a little quicker. And now talking about rebates and remakes and rebates.
Rebates.
Well, it's not even tax season. Yeah. Remakes and reboots. The DC universe itself is right now quite a jumbled.
I really wish they would just.
They just aired Swamp Thing, I hear, and they've already canceled it. And that Swamp Thing itself was a remake or a reboot of a movie that came out when I was a kid at the time, but I did have the action figures. Starred the $6 Million Man. He played Swamp Thing, and it was more like a comedic action movie.
They canceled it already?
That's what I've heard. They released the first season, or the first season is scheduled to be released very soon, but Warner Brothers or whoever's working with that property had decided that they were going to be doing their own streaming service, so it just didn't make sense to release it on this one right now. I think Virginia Madsen just said she was depressed because they just finished the season and they were looking forward to starting the second one, and I thought
they were doing it already on the service. That's why it was coming out as fast as it was. I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
You look it up. You look it up. You check that out. So we've sort of discussed what we think a reboot, a remake, and a retool is, and that's going to change for everyone. Some people consider the 2016 Ghostbusters a remake. Some consider it a reboot. There's different ways to view that. However you want to classify that is really up to you. We're not telling you how you have to quantify your likes or dislikes on a particular property. We're just sort of trying to figure out, when someone says reboot, well, what does reboot mean? Does it mean starting over? Does it mean continuing on from a certain point? Or does it mean completely just taking the mythos and redoing it? Like the X-Men films, I would say since X-Men, the original film, they've been, I guess, rebooted.
Yeah.
Between the timelines going, and some characters like Jean Grey and Scott being, they're at a certain age in the first film, and now even
they're younger.
In this film, Dark Phoenix, they're younger.
Well, from what I got was that Bryan Singer, he did the first two.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think he did Days of Future Past as well.
Well, yeah, eventually. But so he did 1 and 2.
I believe. Don't quote me.
Right. And then he got offered to do Superman Returns. So then he went and did Superman Returns. And then he had a different director do
Burt
3,
Ratner.
Last Stand.
Ratner.
And he wasn't happy about what he did with it. And so he decided he was going to make Days of Future Past and basically just erase.
Well, yeah, James Marsden, actually, that's why he's only in The Last Stand for a minimal amount of time, because he really liked working with Bryan. And Bryan Singer had come up with the idea they were going to, speaking again of remakes and sequels, decided that rather than try and reboot Superman, they were just going to continue on from what Richard Donner had done, which I give the man complete credit for. It's a wonderful idea.
Poorly executed.
But the studio just making X-Men didn't want to wait. They wanted to push it. And he was like, look, just let me go do Superman. I'll come back and I'll do your third one. But they just wanted to do it. Marsden, I think, had the option of leaving at that juncture. Or maybe they had already decided to write him out. I don't know. And he went and worked on Superman Returns pretty much right after. Bryan Singer, of course, saw the finished product, wasn't happy with it. They ended up doing, I believe it was First Class.
Which then there was your soft reboot.
we have to do a reboot or a restart because
fix it because he effed up. Basically, he's like he effed up my timeline.
You done
so now I'm
effed
gonna
up.
fix my timeline back to where I was going to go with it in the first place. So then he basically just reset it. Then he like soft rebooted into a prequel, so that when it came to back, it would be back at the first two, is how it looked like it, and then would continue on to go through the next couple. But then we did Apocalypse, and now we're at Dark Phoenix, and it just like we don't know where we're at.
But then we jump ahead to Logan, and that's ahead of the timeline for the X-Men films is really, really skewed with origins and different events taking place. I'm not even counting the Deadpool.
No,
this is just
that's
that.
not a
so,
thing.
In a way, the fact that Disney has purchased that particular property, as they will purchase all of us, I'm sure.
Well, they're gonna if anybody knows or have heard of Shadowrun, Disney's gonna be the first AAA megacorp, and they'll have their own sovereign land and be their own country.
Apart from Galaxy's Edge,
yeah,
in Anaheim and Florida, but that's, from what I understand, is part of the reason Dark Phoenix was made is just to sort of end Fox's run of this particular property, because Marvel/Disney will more than likely, with the cinematic universe being what it is, start to introduce mutants somehow. We had Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, who are mutants, by the way, folks, for those of you who only follow the cinematic universe.
Not made from
Infinity.
Staff.
Yeah, they weren't made from Infinity Stone power, but that's what they chose to do with the particular property, which is why you had Quicksilver in the X-Men films and then you had Quicksilver in the Marvel universe. So it's such a messed up thing, because when I was a kid there was Star Trek and Star Trek Next Generation, and the only real reboots I ever saw was the Christopher Reeve Superman films, and then like Lois and Clark came on, which was different, or the Adventures of Superboy or whatever was airing. It was just wasn't until we got, once again everything comes back to Star Wars, the Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, starting in prequels.
Well, it was like a reboot prequel, we're just kind of going back. We're reintroducing stuff with a soft reboot into a prequel to give you more, story, right? You did it for more story, kind of give you the why we ended up where we were in 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, and even that was
skewed in
somewhat
ways.
I shouldn't have left Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, with questions, and how does Obi-Wan know where to find his family on Tatooine for Anakin's stepbrother Owen. Well, I digress. We'll get into that another. We need a lot of hot chocolate for me to go into that. But Hollywood sort of jumped, and they still seem to be on that bandwagon, as it were, of remaking things, rebooting properties, retooling properties that already exist, because as Troy had mentioned to me last night prior to us coming into the studio to record just some discussion points, has Hollywood completely run out of fresh ideas?
Yeah.
Or are the things they're doing with the property, again, Last Jedi, fresh ideas,
right?
But divisive. So Fantastic Beasts, where to find them? Harry Potter Wizarding World franchise. A lot of fans really enjoy them because they add more depth. They add a North American element rather than just everything taking place in Britain. But Britain seems to be a little bit more
sophisticated.
Well, it's wired to that, guys. It's Britain, dragons and knights,
right,
and all that.
Not so close-minded.
Yeah.
I guess if you want to use that word, I guess, but it's like, you get there and they outlawed beasts, and you're not allowed to have beasts and stuff like it's just kind of like a really like kind of
it's a much more it's a much more controlled. Yeah, it's much more like the America in those films is you have to have permits for your wand and all this other stuff.
Yeah, you can't mingle with muggles.
Yeah,
and stuff like that, like
which is sort of different. It just sort of shows you that even in the magic world, that political statements are very present. Which the only reason I'm bringing Harry Potter up is I actually am going to see next Saturday the music of Harry Potter at the local Windspear Symphony, which I'm looking forward to.
That's good.
I'm a Harry Potter fan. I do like the universe. I don't own everything under the sun. I've got a scarf and a hoodie. It's a fun little.
What is it? What's the website?
Pottermore?
Pottermore? Yeah. I went to. I'm on Pottermore. Of course.
You got a Patronus? I don't. I haven't done that yet.
I'm Gryffindor. That's just how
I am too. My wife's a Ravenclaw.
Oh,
but I mean,
it does
how would you
happen.
not know that though?
Right. You see her, she's
she's a Ravenclaw.
Oh, my roommate. You look at my roommate, the first thing I see is Hufflepuff.
Yeah,
and you know what?
Yeah, I've met your roommate.
He's Hufflepuff.
He's
like he's just Hufflepuff.
He huffled and he puffed and he blew his house down. But coming to the Hollywood aspect of it, Hollywood just started remaking, as I mentioned, their properties and rebooting them all. And it's, I think, to a point where some people are really sort of tired of it.
Yeah.
They don't want to see another prequel. They'd rather see sequels. I thought Disney making sequels to the original Star Wars film was the best thing they could do, because where are these characters? We all want to see what happened to them. But then they mix it up. They do a sequel and then they go back and do a prequel. They did Rogue One, and they did Solo, and they've also done Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker coming out. So you get this mix of prequels and sequels. And for the generic moviegoer, like my mother, for example, who goes to a movie once in a blue moon, if I take her, I've got to tell her what time period we're even going into, because, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen the 2015 film, The Force Awakens, Han Solo dies. 2 years later, they're doing a film called Solo, and my mom calls me, are they doing a Solo movie? Who's Han Solo? Well, I thought Harrison Ford was dead. No, Mom, Han Solo is dead. Harrison Ford is very much alive. He's grumpy, but he's alive.
Man alive.
So trying to explain all these elements, and I'm involved in the fandom. Like, to a generic moviegoer, I'm sure this is just like, what? Again, from last week's episode, we only had who's better, Kirk or Picard, and suddenly it's like, well, which version of Kirk?
Yeah.
Wait, what? What do you mean, which version of Kirk? There's fan film versions like Vic Mignogna. There's William Shatner himself. There's Chris Pine. Like, these are discussions you never thought you'd have, and Hollywood jumped on this prequel or remake phase.
Yeah. The reboots just are kind of tiring, like Superman, like not Superman, but like just superhero movies in general. We all, 98% of the people who are going to watch these movies already know the story. Now I get you kind of have to, for the new people coming in, but I'm tired of origin stories. I know the story. Just get into an actual movie without having to have like a half hour into the movie of the person's origins when we already know and have had 5 movies of his origin story or her origin story. Let's just get to movies. Let's just get them making
Spider-Man
movies.
Homecoming. It skipped that, and it actually was done really well. I'm sure they might do flashbacks or something, but again, Incredible Hulk, same deal. Just a quick little flash. There you go. There's I wish Zach
where
was
we were
here. Zach knows what comic this is from if he's listening, but there's a Superman comic. I think was it All-Star Superman? I can't remember, but it basically had the origin on one panel. It had a page and it was split into 4 panels. It said Doom Planet, Brilliant Scientist, Kindly Couple, Superman. And it just summed it up right then and there. There it is. Spider-Man Homecoming, bitten by a radioactive spider. His uncle was killed, and that's why he dedicates his. You're
just
right.
Quick little flash, and we got it. All right.
You don't need to do it. And maybe we'll see less of that in upcoming reboots.
Hopefully.
But television has more character development than a movie.
Right, which is okay.
So if you're doing a television show, origins are actually kind of a neat thing to see. But like, I didn't watch it beyond the first season, but Smallville, that was a retelling of Superman, and it went through the whole origin of him in a different way.
Retelling of Clark Kent becoming Superman.
Okay, fair enough. Yes. No, I get it. I get it. Yeah.
We can't say that he was Superman when you're on screen wearing the suit for 7 seconds.
You're not even wearing the suit, though. He just opens his shirt.
Well, he does fly up in it, but either way. But he was either way. We could debate it for hours. But anyways, it was a retelling of Clark Kent becoming Superman. It wasn't a Superman TV show. It was just a show about Clark Kent becoming Superman.
And then you have Supergirl, where Superman does show up occasionally, but they don't really need to go into his origins. They just, you know who Superman is. You should know who Superman is. And similar to Batman, the Batman v Superman, the Dawn of Justice or Yawn of Justice, depending if you're not a fan of it. The intro to Batman's origin, there it is. Superman gets a whole film. Yeah, Superman gets a whole film and Batman gets this little phase. But it works.
Slow motion. But it's slow motion, so it's way better. Because it was in slow motion.
Okay.
Because it's usually just fast. They actually got shot. They died.
Yeah.
Scream and cry. I'm a kid.
Oh, I guess.
I become Batman. There's like slow motion. They got killed slowly this time.
Well, they that happened in the Michael Keaton version as
know.
well, but I don't think the rate of speed makes the moment more prevalent.
I don't know. You never know.
But I don't know. We'll see what Pattinson does with it.
I don't know. Let's see. He's done some really good roles. Like most people know him as, I don't even know, the sparkly vampire. I don't remember his name.
I think Edward.
Yeah,
it's an English name.
What's the Edward in the Wolf? What the fuck?
I don't know. I don't know
which one was Team Edward and Team.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Doesn't matter.
Anyways, yeah, but like he's been in other movies other than Twilight and.
Is it Jacob? Team Jacob?
Yeah, maybe.
Why are we talking about this?
I don't know. Anyways, because he's going to be Batman.
But fair enough. Thank you.
But he's been in other movies where he's actually done some really good acting in it. So again, I'm going to keep my views on it until I actually see it to actually make any kind of judgment. Oh God, this sparkly vampire guy is going to suck. I don't know. I haven't seen him put the cowl on. I haven't seen him play Bruce Wayne. So we'll see.
Which they wouldn't have hired him without having him put a suit on.
You know,
they did the same thing for Brandon. They did the same thing for Henry when they had them audition, I believe Henry wore one of Chris Reeves' suits, one of the stunt suits.
Cool.
Which is fantastic. But they typically have them put one of the suits on. The infamous photo of Nicolas Cage when Tim Burton was going to do a Superman film is still floating around. The late John Schnepp did a whole video documentary on that film. So if you ever have time, check it out online. But Hollywood seems to have sort of switched gears from doing prequels in most cases. Although, again, talking about Star Wars, they're still doing it. Switching to retools such as Star Trek Discovery, remakes between the various DC universes and rebooting those or restarting those, the cinematic universe of that. And now sequels are starting to occur again. Mm-hmm. You know,
we got
Halloween, that's been rebooted at least 3-4 times. I'm not an expert here, but I know...
they did the original up to, I think, they went to like
six films, because Paul Rudd, I think, was in the lot, and then it went to H2O, and then H2O, they did another one where
Rob Zombie did, right?
Then there was a Rob Zombie one, and now there's this one, which is kind of sequel
to the original,
which itself is called Halloween. So
just it's just full circle, I guess.
Yeah, and
but what would you consider that then? Is this an actual sequel, or is it just a retooling of the original? Or
it's a sequel. Reboot? I would say it's a sequel because Laurie has gone through the events of the first film.
True.
And now she's older. But is it a remake of H2O, but H4O maybe?
Sure. I don't know. I think it just kind of like put Rob Zombies aside and just went right from
they did.
From the original, right? So,
which itself took everything, but took the original ones out, put his own in there, and now they've gone back and said, okay, well, we're going to go back to this storyline, but we're going to ignore the other sequels that were made after the original as well, including the other ones that Jamie Lee Curtis showed up for, because I believe her character was actually killed in one of them. I think there was one after H2O where she actually dies.
I don't know. I stopped watching after 2 or 3. It's like Nightmare on Elm Street. How many times have they done that?
Yeah, well, Robert Englund did it, I think, six times, I believe. Again, folks, I don't have the exact amount.
James Earl.
And then it was rebooted, and they had the gentleman who played Rorschach in Watchmen James Earl played him.
Something or other.
He was also in
Jackie Earl Jones or something.
I don't remember. He was actually also in another reboot, RoboCop, which we'll get into a little bit more depth later.
I'd buy that for $1.
You sure would. And I would actually buy it for $1. Mm-hmm. I would pay more than $1 for that film. And again, we just lost some subscribers. But that's another example of a reboot or a remake. I would say that's a remake.
I said it's a remake.
That's a remake. And they've gone, now they did the remake, and I enjoyed it, but commercially it just didn't perform the way they wanted. And now they're doing another RoboCop film, but they're going back to the ones that Peter Weller did. Peter Weller is not playing RoboCop again, but they're basically treating this next film like a sequel to it. And the question is there's been 3 RoboCop films. 2 of them starred Peter Weller. There was a television series. So is this new film going to go back and be like the newest Halloween, where it's right after RoboCop?
Yeah.
Or is this like, because they can't call it RoboCop 3. It's like Superman Returns. Superman Returns is technically Superman 5, but the way Bryan Singer puts it in the timeline, it's between Superman 2 and 3.
Yeah.
But even that doesn't make sense because Superman 3 happened. There's no mention that Superman has a kid. These are where different timelines and infinite Earths start confusing people.
I think we erased 3 and 4 because they weren't good.
Which is, that seems to be his MO. I'll just go and erase what you did.
I don't like what you did.
I don't like what you did. I'm gonna do it. You directed Bohemian Rhapsody. I wonder if he's gonna.
Well, that was just a lot of lies in that. The whole biopic was a lie. A lot of stuff they just made up in it, and most of the timeline was skewed from when actually things happened.
Yeah, there were some differences there. I thought it was acted really well, obviously.
Well, no, don't get me wrong. The acting and singing and stuff was fantastic.
Fun note for those Jurassic Park fans out there: Young Timmy is the bass player.
Yeah.
In Bohemian Rhapsody.
He looks a lot like the guy.
When my wife and I watched it, we rented it at home there and watched it, and I paused it and I'm like, well, we're back in the car again. And she's like, what? I'm like, that's Timmy from Jurassic Park. And she looks at me, she's like, why do you have to make me feel old? I'm like, because you do it to me all the time. Because my wife is 5 years younger than me. So anytime a song comes on, she'll be like, junior high, honey. And I'll be like, yeah, thanks for that. I didn't start feeling old till I had a young wife that would continually tell me how much older I am. I can't wait for her shows to get oh, well, no, they're sort of doing that. They got a Dark Crystal sequel coming.
Oh,
which is totally excited about. But amazing. I'm waiting for the day, and if it ever happens, I'm waiting for the day where they remake Labyrinth, because her head will just split.
Or just make a sequel.
I don't think they'll remake it. I imagine a sequel is likely. There's a lot of people who could do a younger David Bowie becoming the Goblin. And there's a prequel you could do. Mm-hmm. You know, how does how does Jareth become the Goblin King?
Well, they have a comic series on how he did.
Oh, did they? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's I think it's still running right now. Actually, I think a new.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe my wife got an art. She got a labyrinth stuff. Oh. I think short of having a welcome mat that says hello.
I have a bunch of stuff from them. I love the Labyrinth.
Henson is
Dark
genius.
Crystal?
Yeah, genius.
Oh my god, I love Dark Crystal.
The first two Ninja Turtles. Like, before CGI, folks, like, you don't understand how much this blew our minds seeing live action Ninja Turtles. And I'm sure Corey Feldman gets called Donatello as often as he gets called Mouth from Goonies, or trying to kill, speaking of horror movies, trying to kill Jason from Friday the 13th. But is Hollywood, there's a marketing component to it for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, we want to make money, want to keep this property vibrant, but being that the Ghostbusters just had its 35th anniversary, and they just had Fan Fest in Culver City, California on the studio, and talked about some of the upcoming GB20 film things that would potentially be coming down, a lot of the new marketing, a lot of stuff we just didn't have, because Ghostbusters didn't really have a lot of toy lines and stuff when I was a kid, apart from the real Ghostbusters cartoon. Where is the line between, okay, we're trying to keep this property vibrant and alive and growing with new characters, and when is it like, okay, this is pure just... You guys should just have left this property alone. Like The Last Starfighter is a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of it. Gotten to meet Alex Rogan and Maggie, Lance Guest and Catherine Mary. But speaking with them and asking them, hey, would you rather see a sequel or a remake? And both of them are like sequel. And not just because they would probably get a role in it. It would
just be nice.
Yeah, it would be nice to see the characters move on to other things, even if you don't like the direction the sequel trilogy for Star Wars has taken. The characters are there, and you get the closure, whether you like it or not. The closure, hopefully, we'll find out with Carrie's Princess Leia and Rise of Skywalker.
But seeing and hearing it, it's all right, but we'll see.
You get that closure. You can choose not to like it or not accept it, but
you don't have to go.
It's there. But some series don't work. They did a Knight Rider television series again,
like Knight Rider 2000.
The one with, maybe it was 2000. It's not Kid anymore, or maybe they still call it Kid, but it's a Mustang Cobra.
Yeah, 2000.
Val Kilmer is the voice.
Yeah, 2000. Yeah.
And David Hasselhoff shows up in there, and
it's like a soft sequel.
It's
soft continuation.
Yeah, it's a soft continuation, but the Mr. Sweeney isn't the voice of Kit, and you need that there. And I get making it a newer car but here's the thing, folks. Everyone knows the original Kit, and in my opinion, it would have been a better show had you kept the Trans Am and just updated what it can do. Mm-hmm. because it's a retro car.
Right.
As being a ghost head and being a Ghostbuster, I can tell you that no one cares if you're driving the Ecto 1A or the Ecto 1 or the Ecto 1 from Answer the Call, the 2016 Ghostbusters film. They just care that it's an Ecto 1. There's 2 Jurassic Park Jeeps that are in Edmonton. I'm trying to get a hold of one of the gentlemen actually to see if I can get my wife a ride in it for her birthday, because that's her dream car, is the Jurassic Park Jeep, not the Forester, the Jeep. And my dream car is Kit. And oddly enough, the Jurassic World films, the first Jurassic World, there's your
original.
There it is, and there's another sequel, right? Mm-hmm. Is it better to do sequels and continue these on and take the stories in new directions, or is it something, okay, just leave the property alone? Like, right, don't remake The Last Starfighter. Either do a sequel or just leave it alone, because you get sequels like, I think they've remade Dirty Dancing and Footloose, and those have just tanked from what I understand. I could be wrong, but some people might love them a lot.
Well, Havana Nights, I think it was.
Yeah, there was a sequel or a prequel called Havana Nights, I think.
Yeah, Havana
and then
Nights.
they did remake it.
Oh, did they? Oh,
they did remake it.
And I didn't. See
I think Abigail Breslin was in the Footloose, because
was it her, or was it what's her, Juliana Hoffman? She was.
Maybe, I don't know. I know they redid Dirty Dancing, and I know they have, because my mother, I sort of asked her about it, and she was not excited.
Oh, she wasn't.
It's Kevin Bacon or Patrick Swayze, and if it ain't them, it ain't worth watching.
Oh, it's Footloose. Come on. But no one beats the original Footloose.
No, and that's the other. I mean, even when I was in high school, they remade Leave It to Beaver and Lost in Space. Remakes have been going on.
One.
Sorry?
They did another Lost in Space.
Yeah, that, from what I understand, that series is actually quite good.
It is.
So
I liked it.
But
I'm waiting for season 2 right away here.
But therein comes another point. You've got reboots that just, or remakes that just were horrid, maybe, and just didn't get the right release time. Like the Godzilla film, which we refer to in the community as Zilla, with Matthew Broderick, did not get really a lot of acclaim or a lot of fan love, and yet the 2014 one is, again, pretty divisive, as is King of the Monsters. But for fans who love the basic points of Godzilla, it's there. In my opinion, it's a great remake.
I preferred Godzilla 1998, Matthew Broderick, to the 2014.
And that's fine.
And, right, and that's fine. But like I said, I can't really talk much yet on the new Godzilla, because I haven't seen it. But just from the...
Well, maybe we'll go after we're done here.
Yeah. Just from the trailers, I think I've already seen more of Godzilla in the trailers of the new one than I did in the entire movie of... Yeah, the whole 2014 one.
Hey, they listened to some of the critiques, I think, on the 2014 film and said, okay, well, let's now we can do more of this. Similar, like Sonic the Hedgehog, that trailer got released and fans were like, what is Sonic look like this? And the director said, okay, I'm gonna change him.
Well, what's that called? I can't remember the thing that people call it. It's like where something looks too realistic to too cartoony, and then there's that valley. I can't remember what it's called.
It's not hyperrealism.
No. There's a specific name for it, where this valley.
Bad idea.
I'll have to look it up and do the name, but I forget about it. I forget what the name is. But there's like this line of where it can be cartoony and kind of real and still look okay. Then there you get to that line, it's this valley where it just doesn't look...
Would you have been better off doing like Mary Poppins and Roger Rabbit and just doing a cartoon character, right? Cool World.
Yeah. That needs a sequel.
Yeah, that's a sleeper hit, I think. A lot of people love Cool World.
Cool. Well, where's Roger Rabbit's sequel? Come on, Warner. Come on, Warner.
It's not. Yeah, that. You know what?
We need a Roger Rabbit.
To see a Roger Rabbit sequel. That was another movie.
Let's just say let's reboot Roger Rabbit. We could totally make it better now, because then and now are graphic wise and CGI and all that could be even more.
Maybe, Pokemon but you could also end up with a reboot. Okay, that was a bad idea. Why did they do that?
Very true.
The original was,
or sequel it up.
Well, there's that. I mean, what?
Update it, sequel it. Let's do the whole new movie over again. Exactly the same movie, just better.
Possibly. There are the people who love a lot of, like, the 2016 Ghostbuster films. A lot of people love it. I haven't seen it. I don't have any urge to see it.
I watched it. and it was okay. I'm not going to say I hated it.
It's the exact same story, and I didn't need to see it again updated. I think Highlander is another property that I'm very passionate about, and I know they've been trying to reboot it or remake it. And initially, I didn't want to see a remake. I wanted to see a continuation because it's about immortality. So it's okay to have Connor McLeod in the 80s, and it's okay to have Duncan McLeod in the 90s. It's okay to have a new guy. But when you look at, and I own all the TV series and all the films, even The Source.
And they mess that shit up.
Exactly. There is a lot of points where this is just The Source specifically. They just go and they do things. So as much as I don't want to see it remade, you can't really continue it.
No.
With the storylines being what they are, and you can't reboot it because you don't really do different timelines like you can in Star Trek.
Yeah. So then what it would
you have to remake it and
redo it. If you just did a sequel to it, it would just be then his kid, who is now just a human anyway. So what would be the point?
Yeah, there's a lot of elements of controversy there. Fans of fandoms love it and they love to hate it at the same time.
Well, they already like from the first one to the second one, they already messed the whole thing up. Like because they went from like being the past to like at the time present, and then into the sequel, they were like from another planet, and they were in the future, and they were like thousands and thousands of years old, and then you're like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then the third one comes out, and you're back at that present time, and you're like, what just happened?
But the series itself was, it wasn't a reboot, the Highlander TV series, because Connor existed. I consider it a sequel, but you could phrase it as a reboot series because they did expand the myth more and the mythos and how does someone become immortal? How do you know that? But coming on to that, what were some? There's plenty of reboots that a lot of people feel maybe were not good, like the Dirty Dancing, the Footloose one. Some people feel the Ghostbusters was not a good idea. But what are some reboots or remakes that you actually were a little bit surprised by and maybe hadn't intended to see or thought you'd like, and turned out you were like, I really enjoyed this.
Enjoy this better?
Yeah, what are some of those for you?
The new Magnificent Seven.
Okay.
I wasn't like Clint Eastwood, amazing.
Yeah.
I was surprised at how good the actual remake was. I wasn't sure about it. Has some pretty good actors in it, and it turned out actually not too darn.
I thought it was okay.
Bad. It surprised me.
Yeah.
It surprised me that it was decent. I like that they rebooted like Casino Royale.
Yeah, that's a good
Royale.
example. The everyone was like in arms about Craig being cast as Bond, and his last films have been some of the highest grossing ones since Connery, I think.
Right. And so like they've been really good. So they kind of like they took it's the same, but then they kind of soft rebooted by going back to Casino Royale,
it's not a remake. It's a reboot because M is Judi Dench,
and now she's not.
Yeah,
right. Because then if you go back, the same sort of thing happened. Because at one point in time, which one?
Bernard Lee.
It's a GoldenEye.
Yes, that's when she becomes M.
Well, no, but like in one of the new ones, I think with Pierce, they had M as a man.
No, GoldenEye, Judi Dench enters as M, and that was the first one. From Connery to Pierce is one guy. One character.
Yeah. Okay. It was then.
Yeah, it's a linear timeline. It's only at Thomas that the world, as it were, in Bond is reset.
Yeah. Okay. Also, Conan the Barbarian.
The Momoa one?
The Momoa one. I love Schwarzenegger's Conan, but I really was surprised at how well the Conan the Barbarian one is with Momoa. He's a really good Conan.
I agree.
I personally think he was a good Conan. Like the story, okay.
I thought he looks great as Conan.
Yeah.
He does. I didn't think it was a great film.
No, like I would say, like we asked, it surprised me. It was better than the original.
We'll disagree there.
Okay. Well, but in a sense, just anyways, it was newer. It was kind of fresher.
On par with Red Sonja or Destroyer, maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
But we'll see.
I'll go with that. I heard The Departed.
Okay. Yeah.
From Infernal Affairs. I
don't
know if you watched Infernal Affairs or not, but it's an Asian film,
and
then they redid it with all the Scorsese there. I think it was Scorsese.
Yeah.
That one was really good. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Gone in 60 Seconds. I like the newer one the previous one, which was like in the 50s, but I guess it was the 50s, so really. But I Am Legend from My Omega Man from the.
Okay, yeah.
Red Dawn. I liked both. The original and the new.
That's good. It's a good point. Like there are some remakes or reboots where people like the new one just as much as the nods and the winks are there.
Yeah. Well, like like The Firm, the movie, and then they made like a series.
They had a series, yeah.
The series was just I don't know, but the film itself was way better than the series. Flatliners. If you watched Flatliners or not, but
it might. Well, I had Kevin Bacon in it, so my mom watched it, so I'm familiar with it. I didn't watch the new one. I didn't hear a lot of great things about it though.
It was a
Kiefer's in it, but he's not the same guy.
Yeah, no, he's
so that's a remake.
Yeah, that's a remake, but like just the original one was better than the remake. Well, obviously Ghostbusters, but we already kind of went on that, and the Shining.
They also today, it's June 13th when they're recording this, they just released a Dr. Sleep trailer starring Ewan McGregor, which is in Stephen King's book. It's the sequel to The Shining.
Oh.
And I wasn't sure if they were going to if this sequel story was going to tie into The Shining film but from the trailer, the imagery looks like Kubrick's. It's not just, I think or Ready Player One, if you've seen that one lately.
Ewan, I think Ewan is...
He plays young Robbie, but who's an adult now.
Yeah. So it is like a sequel, basically.
It is, right? But we weren't sure when we heard details of this if it was going to be just they were going to tie in elements and just talk to the book and not tie it into that first Shining film, because we know Stephen King is not a fan of it. But from the trailer, it looks like the imagery from the first film. No, I'm sure they recreated it.
I'm sure they could tie it in without having to.
But you could, the Overlook could look like any hotel. You can use the Biltmore in LA if you wanted, which doubles as a Sedgwick for Ghostbusters and lots of other films. But you could use that and just do it. So it's interesting to see that some of these films, that Dr. Sleep is in fact a sequel, as opposed to a reboot
of The Shining,
in a sense, right? And speaking of films that you thought were maybe a little better than you thought were going to be, as I mentioned, RoboCop. I had no inkling to see that film at all. I didn't like the way that the black armor looked. I was like, oh, what are they doing? Why do they keep doing this? And I finished work early one day, and I used to be on an early morning shift, and I went to the theater on a Tuesday, and I said, well, why not? Paid my $6 or whatever it was. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I thought when he looked silver, he looked great. And at the end of the film, when he's sort of back in that idea, I was like, you know what? I really dug this. I thought, his hand and his little bit more of him should have survived than we saw. But overall, fantastic film. It had all the beats there. And unfortunately, in my opinion, anyway, the production company says, okay, well, we're going to go back and do another RoboCop, but it's going to tie into the Peter Weller ones. Okay, so you've got a standalone remake that is just a standalone remake, and now you're back to going to that original timeline, like Halloween. Mm-hmm. So
isn't the guy who played?
He's in Suicide Squad as well. I can't remember his name. He's also in a movie. I think Run All Night with Liam Neeson.
Yeah, Run All Night, and he was Altered Carbon.
Okay, he's in that. Okay,
I love that show.
But that comes to another, we're talking about Hollywood not having good ideas anymore and just continually using reboots and remakes. There are some series out there that we talked about Swamp Thing. The original film was not an Academy Award-winning film by any means, but this one looks like...
Nor was the remake that they did do, and now the series, which I did look it up, and they did cancel it,
And Daredevil remake, right?
Daredevil's
and that's
remake.
Celebrated. Punisher's had, I think, 2 or 3 incarnations between Thomas Jane and
Thomas Jane,
Dolph Lundgren, and I can never remember his name. He's in Thor.
Yeah, I can't.
He's in Rome.
I can't remember his name either.
He's a fantastic actor.
British actor. Yeah. And now then we have John Barenthal.
Yeah, and now you've got remakes and reboots that are done quite well, but here's the thing. Would they be this good if the original one maybe had been better.
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
Spider-Man's been rebooted. We had the Tobey Maguire, then we had Andrew Garfield, and now we've got
Tom
Tom Holland. So, and everyone seems to love, majority-wise, the Tom Holland portrayal and the way he's done. But is that what we would have gotten if maybe Amazing Spider-Man had gotten another film, or Tobey had gotten another one? Like
the last one?
You have to learn from these mistakes. And I think with Tom Holland's, that's been done.
Mm-hmm.
Or in my opinion, Godzilla King of the Monsters,
they listened and learned.
And that's a big thing. Is okay, you don't necessarily have to have a brand new, fresh idea, guys. I am okay with Han Solo dying in Force Awakens. Other things I wasn't really okay with, but it doesn't matter. They're done. But I don't necessarily think they were fresh ideas. But JJ coming back for episode 9, we see that Kylo Ren has the helmet again, and Rey's using the Skywalker lightsaber that has like a different clamp in the middle of it to show that it's been put back together. So I'm sure Disney will say this was the plan the whole time, but I don't believe that is the case.
I think it's more like a Bryan Singer moment where he's like, you effed up my thing I started. I'm fixing it.
But JJ's sort of taking it. He's not doing the Bryan Singer. He's not, JJ will say, no, these are elements, we sort of thought we'd put back. And the other part of me is like,
I'm sure he was just like,
why did you lose them to begin with? Yeah. Like this whole thread in the last film was about this. So is episode 9 going to be a reboot? Like, no, seriously, legitimately.
I agree.
Is he going to touch on the things? Because Rian Johnson didn't touch on a lot of elements from the first film.
I agree. I think whatever JJ had at the time when he did 7 and his thoughts was, and then for the next director to carry those, and then we got Ryan
who wrote it as well, folks.
He wrote it, and he didn't really use any of the things.
Not a lot of them, no.
There's definitely things, but there's so many points where it's like, well, why did you had all these things, and then you just like in the first one, like a perfect example is they made a big deal about the lightsaber.
Yeah.
It's been calling to her and calling to her. She finally finds it. She gets these flashbacks or force flashes or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And then the next movie, he chucks it off a cliff.
Yeah. Elements that don't go anywhere. And that ties into, doing something with a property and just not doing anything with it, not taking it somewhere where it can go. And I think fans would have been happy to see, Force Awakens, they thought, okay, well, that's too much like A New Hope. And then Last Jedi was just so far away from it. It is finding that happy middle ground, which I think something like RoboCop did, or something like Star Trek 2009, I think is a fun film. Into Darkness, it's the Wrath of Khan again, but it's done differently. And I think it would have been a much more interesting design of what if they had found the Botany Bay, which they did, and it wasn't Khan that got woken up, because it's found in a different time period. So maybe different people who didn't survive the initial, because not everyone survived the Botany Bay when the Enterprise finds it. What if at the end, like John Harriman could have been one of Khan's troops, and at the end when they show frozen Doctor Strange there, what if when they panned over him, they show a CGI head of young, Ricardo Montalban?
Yeah.
And you were like, oh, did we dodge that bullet? Like that, I think would have been something interesting. It's the same, but it's different.
Yeah.
So having a property and not doing anything with it, or having a property and just going way off the sidelines so that you alienate the audience who made the originals. The trick is having those beats. Rogue One, which I really, really liked. Out of all the Star Wars, the new films, it's my favorite one out of the new films.
I like that they're tying Fallen Jedi into that.
Yeah. The time period, because Saw Gerrera. And Saw Gerrera is a character from the Clone Wars animated series. So the story cohesiveness is a lot better there. Having a property and doing nothing with it, or going too far, not finding that middle ground. Just real quick before we end off, what is a property you would like to see either retooled, remade, rebooted, or continued?
Honestly, I would love to see Serenity or Firefly continue.
Yeah, you and 14 million others. Hey, we just got more subscribers. Thanks, folks. Good job, Troy.
I don't want a reboot. I want a continuation. I want to see the story. Like
it's too rich a property not to
right,
do anything. The landscape alone.
Like I find that one of the worst companies for effing things up is Fox. And if they're the only ones taking your
much
product,
longer.
Yeah, the only ones taking your product is Fox. Fine, but like there's so many times that a really good show will be on, and then just because viewership dropped for a moment, we've seen the man deliver some insanely amazing character arcs. Like some of the best characters on television were from some of his TV shows.
Oh yeah, you got Buffy, you got Buffy,
Angel,
Serenity, Angel, and of course he did the first two Avengers. So
the two Avengers.
He's got some clout here, folks.
Like you also Dollhouse. Like Dollhouse was a great concept, and if they didn't make him rush, that could have come out even better than it was.
Studio interference,
right? So like
Spider-Man 3,
like just. Sometimes you just need to let them do their thing, even if if viewership does drop, it'll come back because the stories that they can make will bring people back.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of a show you and I both love, Longmire.
Oh,
with again Peter Weller in it, who directed some of the episodes as well. It's a fantastic show. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It's like a contemporary cowboy.
Yeah,
it's something you never thought you'd enjoy.
I'm not a big cowboy fan myself, but this is amazing.
It's a fantastic show. But A&E was airing it, and then they dropped it, and Netflix picked it up. So there are possibilities for certain projects to get a new life and get continuance.
I want to talk about that real quick too. It's that the Netflix pick and shows up, which is I love that they're doing it, but they do it for only like a season or two. And I don't understand why.
Well, because Disney keeps buying their stuff and saying, we're going to pull this off. And Netflix is like, well, fine, we're not going to air it then.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's just like Longmire, they
did 3 seasons. I think it was 3 seasons.
They did 3 seasons. And then Netflix did 2 seasons and then ended it. Right. Now,
no, they did 3. It's 6 seasons in total. Is it 5 altogether? You would
5.
know. Right.
It's 5. Or just recently, they Lucifer.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
2 seasons got canceled. They picked up the 3rd season. Or the 4th season. The 4th season, I think. And they did it. Great. And it was fantastic. And it was literally one of the highest running shows, like streaming shows. They just recently picked up. Top of all of those streaming lists. And then they're like, yeah, we're canceling after this next season. So we're giving them one more season to wrap it all up. So why even take it on if you're just going to
Sometimes it's not even. It depends. I mean, you got to remember Netflix isn't exactly.
I want subscribers. Like, hey, there's 14 million people who are watching the show. Now we're going to get 14 million more viewers, or people who don't have Netflix that come onto the show.
Yeah, but
come onto our subscription.
For those who don't know, it costs money to make a production, folks. It costs a lot of money, and they have. I've worked on projects. I've literally I've been on set for days and days and done the business and done the job, and I still haven't seen the finished project. My IMDb page had stuff on it I've never seen. I worked on it, but I didn't see anything. It happens a lot. But coming back to projects that I'd like to see remade, retooled. I know they're doing Masters of the Universe, which we'll talk about another day. They're doing it whether I want them to or not. I just hope it's good. But in terms of a project, I would like to see remade or continued. There's a show I watched as a kid, one of the many, which I loved, and it was a Canadian-made show, and it doesn't get a lot of love, but there's a cult classic.
Is it The Littlest Hobo?
No.
Oh.
No, although that's a fantastic show, and everyone in our age demographic knows that song.
Yeah.
It's a little show called Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future.
Captain Power.
That toy line, Hasbro tied that whole shoot the screen, and there was in the whole, hey, they're using the show to sell toys. I'm not even going to get into that aspect, but the armor, the apocalyptic future. This was all filmed in a bus station in Toronto, by the way, folks. Is a fantastic. They've tried a couple times to get this series rebooted and continued. I would really love to see. I don't want to see a remake. I would like to see a continuance, but it's pretty unlikely. Tim Dunnigan, who played Captain Power, is a little older these days, and it's hard to sort of it's like Han Solo. What's he been doing for 30 years? So I would love to see that show done, but done in the same aesthetic as the first one. It was a pretty, the CGI elements. You look at it now and you're like, oh God, but like
you could do
as a kid, imagine what they could do.
Now,
you know what they could do with it? Like the shows that they have now have Game of Thrones, for example, the dragons and everything. Of course, if you have dragons, you don't have the wolves. That's the trade-off. But the amount of tools that are there, if you guys, you can find a right story and get back into quality storytelling instead of how do I tie it into the next 6 sequels I want to make. Give the people a good story with good character development. As much as I didn't like Deep Space Nine all that much for Star Trek, the character development was phenomenal. They did storylines. The problem is people sort of felt, that's why they introduced the Dominion and the Federation and the Klingons back in, because people were like, you're kind of getting away from the elements that we really like about it. Like, I get it, you're out in the Bajorans and all that.
You're kind of stuck in the
That's
middle.
great, but I want to see starships. I want to see captains and, Klingons. And you can't get too far away from things or it just doesn't work. But for my credits, I would love to see the Captain Power property redone. It was created by Gary Goddard, who directed the Masters of the Universe film, which, for those who don't know, if you're like, oh my God, that was a horrible movie. It's a horrible movie, but watch the YouTube behind the features and you'll understand what that project went through to get made. Canon pulled out its funding and it went broke. Mattel went broke. They were consistently shutting the power off during the filming. If you look at the Castle Grayskull set, that was designed for a huge sword fight, and they couldn't even do it.
Oh yeah, they didn't. They were down. They went down for big production, and then it went down to literally them like hitting swords a couple times, and that was it.
And we'll get into that. We'll get into that another time. But just when you're looking at sequels or remakes that maybe you don't like, it's easy to look at the commercialism of it and go, they just want to make a quick buck. Sometimes that's possible, and that's how they make their money. They need to make a property that people want to go see. A lot of art house films just don't make money anymore. People don't go to the multiplexes for that. But the other thing to understand is there are a lot of people who do care about the original project and want to make a good quality film, but between editing and studios and producing, sometimes, folks, that is not the end project you get, even if your intention is to make, I think the production of the Star Wars Disney films is great. They use digital elements and they use production elements. They use live elements. It's great for the actors. It's great. It keeps everyone in the industry working.
Yeah.
But the stories are where I have the hiccup. Whereas I've seen reboots that have a great story or great potential, but just not executed really well, like Masters of the Universe. And maybe because that wasn't as successful as it maybe should have been, now we'll get the reboot and the remake, similar to my opinion of Godzilla 2014 and King of the Monsters, where, okay, we listened, we talked to people who are involved in the fandom, and now we kind of have a better idea about how to market a film that makes some money and still please the fans.
In the process of that, kind of rebooting their own cinematic universe.
Bingo, exactly.
Now you got Kong and Godzilla versus
Kong. Again, like Batman versus Superman, I don't want them to fight, but it's going to happen. But hopefully it's
done well.
Yes.
Well, we'll see, I guess. Right?
My money's on Zilla.
But just quick before we go, talk about reboots. Canadian, they're rebooting the Raccoons, the cartoon.
You can't see my face right now, folks, but it's a mixture of pride and panic.
No, I saw some stuff. It's the animation.
Mr. Law, he'd run with us. I got that in my head now. Thanks.
You're welcome. The animation's a little more cartoony than I guess it was before, just regular cartoons. But it's a little more kiddish, cartoonish. But it still has the same.
Why don't you just air the cartoons again? There's nothing wrong. They're not dated.
No, they're not. But we're just kind of redoing.
Didn't realize Cyril Sneer isn't a millennial character enough.
He's not.
I had a plush. My brother and I had plush toys of Burt Raccoon.
Yeah,
fantastic. But I think that's going to draw to a close our second episode. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Again, you can find our Facebook page, which is right now the only real way to find the podcast. We do have messages and comments disabled right now. We will get those hooked up, but right now it's just Troy and I doing this, and between full-time jobs and I'm in the middle of looking for a house, managing all that is a bit much. So we do want to thank everyone for just having some patience, and when we have some additional help to help manage that, we do want to hear your thoughts on things. We do want to interact with the group that listens to us, and we do want to thank you very much
for listening.
Yeah, because we know you guys probably don't have a lot of extra free time either.
And following us on Podbean, appreciate that.
Fantastic. But until then, we just want everyone to be excellent to each other and party on, dudes. Keep your stick on the ice until they reboot that.
And we will see you.
See you.